people who love like falling. No safety net, no hesitation, just the full weight of their heart colliding with someone else's. They don't hold back pieces of themselves. They don't test the waters. They dive in completely, desperately, as if love itself were oxygen, and without it, they'd suffocate. And when it ends, as it often does, they're left gasping, wondering why they can't seem to love any other way. If you've ever felt this, you already know the weight of it. The exhaustion of caring too much, the embarrassment of being called too intense, too needy, too much. You've probably been told to calm down, to protect yourself, to stop giving so freely. But you can't. Because for you, love isn't a choice you make carefully. It's a reflex, a need, a wound that never quite healed. This is the psychology of people who love too deeply, and it's far more complex than most realize. To understand why some people love with such intensity, we have to go back to the beginning, to childhood, where the blueprints for all our future relationships are quietly drawn. Attachment theory, first developed by British psychologist John Bowlby, reveals that the way we were cared for as infants shapes how we love as adults. It's not mystical. It's not destiny. It's neurobiology meeting experience, creating patterns that echo through every relationship we'll ever have. Bowlby believed that attachment isn't just a childhood phase we outgrow. It operates, as he famously said, from the cradle to the grave. When we're infants, our survival depends entirely on our caregivers responding to our needs. Cry, and someone comes. Reach out, and you're held. These early interactions teach us whether the world is safe, whether people can be trusted, and most importantly, whether we are worthy of love. Children who receive consistent, responsive care typically develop what psychologists call secure attachment. They learn that their needs matter, that love is reliable, and that they can depend on others without losing themselves. But not every child gets this foundation. Some grow up with caregivers who are unpredictable, loving one moment, cold the next. Others experience what researchers describe as emotional hunger from parents who use the child to meet their own needs rather than the child's. And still others have caregivers who are simply absent, physically or emotionally, leaving the child to navigate fear and loneliness alone. These children develop what's known as anxious attachment, a pattern characterized by a deep fear of abandonment and an overwhelming need for closeness. Around 20% of adults fall into this category, and for them, love becomes both a desperate pursuit and a chronic source of anxiety. Based on what we know about early relational trauma, we can assume that these individuals internalized a core belief during childhood. Love is uncertain, and you must work constantly to earn it. The neuroscience behind this is fascinating and sobering. When anxiously attached individuals encounter any sign of distance or rejection from a partner, their brains respond as if facing a genuine threat. The attachment system, designed evolutionarily to keep vulnerable humans close to protective figures, goes into overdrive. Heart rate increases, cortisol spikes. The amygdala, the brain's alarm center, lights up. This isn't drama, it's survival mode, activated by a system that learned early on that connection is fragile and must be vigilantly maintained. This could imply that for people who love too deeply, romantic relationships aren't just about companionship or affection. They're about safety, about proving again and again that they won't be left behind. The stakes feel existential because, in a way, they are. These patterns were formed when emotional abandonment genuinely threatened a child's sense of security in the world. Anxiously attached, adults tend to use what researchers call hyperactivating strategies. When distressed, instead of calming themselves or seeking balanced support, they amplify their emotions and cling harder to their partners. They need constant reassurance. They check their phones obsessively. They interpret a delayed text as a sign of waning love. They analyze every word, every tone, every glance, searching for evidence that they're about to be abandoned. And the cruel irony is that this very behavior, the clinginess, the neediness, the emotional intensity, can push partners away, confirming their deepest fear. Meanwhile, their internal working models, the mental frameworks they carry about themselves and others, reinforce this cycle. Anxiously attached individuals often hold negative views of themselves, believing deep down that they're not worthy of consistent love. At the same time, they view others with a mixture of hope and apprehension, wanting desperately to trust, but unable to fully believe that anyone will stay. This creates a painful contradiction. They crave closeness, but can never quite feel secure in it. Research has shown that attachment styles form early and remain remarkably stable throughout life, though they can shift with significant relationship experiences. The key insight from attachment theory is that our earliest bonds don't just influence our relationships. They become the template through which we perceive and respond to all intimate connections. For those who love too deeply, this template is written in the language of fear and longing. At the core of loving too deeply often lies something psychologists call an abandonment wound. This isn't just a fear of being left. It's a psychological injury formed when a child experiences or perceives that they were not enough to keep someone close. Maybe a parent was inconsistent, disappearing emotionally without warning. Maybe there was a divorce, a death, or a caregiver too overwhelmed by their own struggles to be present. Or maybe the wound is subtler, a parent who loved conditionally, whose affection had to be earned through achievement or perfect behavior. Children are meaning-making creatures. When they experience abandonment or emotional neglect, they don't typically blame the adult. Instead, they internalize it, concluding that something about them was lacking. This could explain why adults with abandonment wounds so often struggle with self-worth. They carry a belief formed in childhood: if you really knew me, you'd leave too. The abandonment wound creates a particular kind of vigilance in relationships. People with this wound become experts at reading emotional cues, constantly scanning for signs of withdrawal or disinterest. They might interpret a partner's need for alone time as rejection. A forgotten text becomes evidence of declining love. A distracted conversation signals the beginning of the end. This hypersensitivity isn't paranoia. It's a defense mechanism developed by a brain that learned early to detect threats to connection. Research on childhood trauma and adult relationships suggests that these wounds don't simply fade with time. They become encoded in our neural pathways, shaping how we interpret social cues and respond to intimacy. When an adult with an abandonment wound enters a romantic relationship, their brain is essentially operating from an old map, one drawn in childhood when the emotional terrain was genuinely dangerous. The abandonment wound also affects how people regulate their emotions. When triggered by perceived rejection, individuals with this wound often experience emotions with overwhelming intensity. What might register as mild disappointment for someone else feels catastrophic to them. This is because the current situation is activating old emotional memories, layering past abandonment onto present experience. The result is a reaction that may seem disproportionate to others, but feels entirely justified from the inside. Abandonment wounds manifest in various ways across relationships. Some people become hypervigilant and controlling, trying to manage every aspect of the relationship to prevent loss. Others become self-sacrificing to an extreme degree, believing that if they just give enough, do enough, be enough, they'll finally be worthy of staying. Still others engage in what psychologists call protest behaviors, dramatic emotional displays designed to test whether the partner will stay even when things get difficult. We can infer from attachment research that healing this wound requires more than just understanding it intellectually. The wound was created in relationship, and based on what therapeutic research suggests, it often needs to be healed in relationship too, with partners who can remain steady when the anxious partner is testing them, or through therapy where old patterns can be safely examined and new ones practiced. The power of the abandonment wound lies partly in its self-fulfilling nature. Because people with this wound expect to be left, they often behave in ways that create distance or push partners away. They might test their partner's commitment through jealous behaviors or constant reassurance seeking. They might sabotage relationships that are going well because the vulnerability of happiness feels dangerous. Or they might choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, unconsciously ensuring that the abandonment they fear will eventually occur. Understanding the abandonment wound doesn't make it disappear, but it does create space for compassion. These patterns aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're adaptive strategies that a child developed to cope with emotional pain. The fact that these strategies no longer serve the adult doesn't diminish the courage it took to survive the original wound. There's a phenomenon that goes beyond even anxious attachment, a state where love tips into something more consuming. Psychologists call it limerence, an involuntary cognitive and emotional state characterized by intense romantic desire, intrusive thinking, and emotional dependence on having those feelings reciprocated. While not everyone who loves deeply experiences limerence, there's significant overlap in the underlying mechanisms. Limerence was first described by psychologist Dorothy Tenoff in 1979. Based on interviews with hundreds of people who described being in love in ways that went far beyond normal romantic attachment. What emerged was a portrait of something closer to addiction. People experiencing limerence report spending hours each day thinking about their beloved, not just warm, happy thoughts, but obsessive rumination. They replay conversations. They imagine future scenarios. They interpret every tiny interaction as either devastating rejection or euphoric reciprocation. The neurochemistry of limerence reveals why it feels so much like addiction. The brain of someone in limerence shows patterns similar to obsessive-compulsive disorder and substance dependence. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation, floods the system during moments of hope or contact with the object of desire. This creates a powerful reinforcement loop. Each text, each glance, each small sign of interest produces a neurochemical high. And like any addiction, the person builds tolerance, needing more contact, more reassurance, more evidence of reciprocation to achieve the same emotional relief. When that contact is withheld or uncertain, the brain responds with anxiety and craving. This could explain why limerence is often most intense in situations of uncertainty, unrequited love, affairs, long-distance relationships, or partnerships with emotionally unavailable people. The intermittent reinforcement, the unpredictability of reward, actually strengthens the obsession rather than diminishing it. What distinguishes limerence from healthy romantic love is the degree of suffering involved and the disconnect from reality. People in limerence often recognize intellectually that their fixation is disproportionate, that they're building an idealized version of someone they may barely know. Yet they can't stop. The intrusive thoughts persist. The emotional highs and lows dominate their inner life. Work suffers. Other relationships fade. The entire self becomes organized around this one connection. For individuals prone to both anxious attachment and limerence, romantic relationships can become almost unbearably intense. Based on what research into attachment and obsessive love suggests, we can assume these individuals are dealing with both a childhood-formed fear of abandonment and a neurochemical vulnerability to obsessive romantic fixation. They don't just want love, they need it with a desperation that feels like drowning. Limerence typically follows predictable stages. It begins with a sudden onset, a moment of recognition or attraction that feels fated or extraordinary. Then comes the crystallization phase, where the person begins to focus intensely on the object of their desire, attributing to them idealized qualities and interpreting neutral behaviors as signs of special connection. The middle phase is characterized by the obsessive rumination and emotional dependency, with mood swings based on perceived reciprocation or rejection. Eventually, limerence either transfers to someone new or it fades, though this process can take months or even years. The distinction between limerence and love is crucial. Love involves genuine care for another person's well-being, acceptance of their flaws, and a desire for mutual growth. Limerence is fundamentally self-focused. It's about the feelings the other person generates, the validation they provide, the fantasy they represent. The actual person becomes almost secondary to the neurochemical experience of longing and occasional fulfillment. Yet, for those experiencing limerence, this intellectual understanding provides little relief. The state feels involuntary, beyond conscious control. This could imply that limerence hijacks the same brain systems designed to create lasting pair bonds, but in a dysregulated way that generates suffering rather than connection. Codependency shares territory with both anxious attachment and limerence, but adds another dimension: the complete loss of self in relationship. Where anxiously attached people desperately seek closeness, and those experiencing limerence obsess over someone specific. Codependent individuals define their entire identity through their relationships. They don't just love someone, they become someone's emotional life support system, convinced that their value lies entirely in what they can do for others. The term codependency originally emerged from addiction treatment, describing partners and family members of alcoholics who became so focused on managing the addict's behavior that they lost touch with their own needs and identity. But the concept has expanded to describe any relationship dynamic where one person's sense of self is excessively dependent on another person's approval, needs, or presence. Codependent love looks like devotion from the outside, but it's built on fear rather than genuine intimacy. The codependent person becomes hypervigilant to their partner's emotional states, constantly adjusting themselves to prevent conflict, abandonment, or disapproval. They become expert caretakers, problem solvers, emotional managers, but in the process, they disappear. Their preferences become whatever their partner prefers. Their goals align with their partner's goals. They may not even know anymore what they want independent of the relationship. This pattern could imply a profound confusion between love and self-sacrifice. Many codependent individuals grew up in families where their emotional needs were consistently subordinated to someone else's, perhaps a parent with addiction, mental illness, or narcissistic traits. As children, they learned that love means making yourself small, anticipating others' needs, and never asking for too much. The child who becomes the family peacemaker or the parentified caretaker of their own parents often grows into an adult who can only feel valuable when needed. The difference between healthy interdependence and codependency lies in the underlying motivation and the preservation of self. In healthy relationships, people choose to support and care for each other while maintaining their own identities, interests, and boundaries. In codependent relationships, one person needs to be needed so desperately that they'll tolerate neglect, disrespect, or even abuse, rather than risk losing the relationship. They become addicted to being indispensable, confusing someone's dependence on them with genuine love. From a psychological perspective, codependency can be understood as a strategy to manage the terror of abandonment. If you make yourself absolutely necessary to someone, the reasoning goes, they can't leave. You become so entangled in their life, so essential to their functioning, that losing you would be too destabilizing. But this strategy backfires. Partners of codependent individuals may feel suffocated by the intensity of focus, or they may exploit it, taking advantage of someone willing to sacrifice anything. And the codependent person, despite all their giving, never achieves the security they're seeking because their worth remains externally defined. Codependency also involves poor boundaries or a complete absence of them. Codependent people often can't distinguish where they end and another person begins. They take responsibility for others' feelings, blame themselves for others' problems, and feel guilty for having needs or desires that differ from their partners. They might obsessively check on their partner, give advice when it isn't wanted, or try to control situations to ensure their partner's happiness. Not out of respect for the partner's autonomy, but out of their own need to feel secure. The core wound underlying codependency is typically shame, a deep-seated belief that one is fundamentally flawed or unlovable. Based on what we know about childhood emotional development, this shame often forms in environments where the child's authentic self was rejected, or where love was highly conditional. To survive emotionally, the child learned to become whoever they needed to be to receive scraps of approval. As adults, they continue this pattern, shape-shifting to fit others' needs, while their own authentic self remains hidden. even from themselves. Recovery from codependency requires the painful work of separating one's identity from others' needs and opinions. It involves asking, often for the first time in years, what do I actually want? What do I feel? Who am I when I'm not performing for someone else's approval? These questions can feel genuinely frightening to codependent individuals because their entire sense of safety has been built on external validation. Not everyone who loves deeply has insecure attachment or codependent patterns. Some people possess a temperamental trait that makes them experience all emotions, including love, with greater intensity. Psychologist Elaine Aron identified this trait as high sensitivity, characterized by deeper processing of sensory and emotional information, greater awareness of subtleties, and stronger emotional responsiveness. Approximately 15 to 20% of people are highly sensitive, and for them, loving deeply isn't pathological. It's part of how they're neurologically wired. Highly sensitive people, or HSPs, have nervous systems that process stimuli more thoroughly than average. They notice subtleties others miss. The slight shift in a partner's tone, the fleeting expression that crosses someone's face, the unspoken tension in a room. In relationships, this translates to profound attunement. HSPs often make deeply empathic partners who intuitively understand their loved one's emotional states and needs. But this gift has a shadow side. The same sensitivity that allows HSPs to love with such depth also makes them vulnerable to overwhelm. They feel their partner's pain as if it were their own. They absorb emotional atmospheres, taking on anxiety, sadness, or frustration that doesn't even originate with them. After conflicts or emotionally intense conversations, they need significantly more recovery time than less sensitive people. And because they process everything so deeply, relationship problems that others might shrug off can feel devastating to HSPs. Based on research into high sensitivity, we can infer that HSPs in relationships face a particular challenge: how to honor their depth of feeling without becoming depleted by it. They struggle in relationships with emotionally unavailable partners because they're giving profound emotional attunement and receiving surface-level connection in return. The mismatch isn't just disappointing, it's exhausting. They're operating at an emotional depth that their partner can't or won't match. There's overlap between high sensitivity and anxious attachment, but they're not identical. An HSP with secure attachment will still feel emotions intensely, but will have the internal resources to regulate those feelings and maintain relationship balance. An HSP with anxious attachment faces a double challenge: the temperamental intensity of the highly sensitive nervous system, plus the fear-driven vigilance of insecure attachment. For these individuals, loving deeply becomes almost overwhelming as biological sensitivity compounds psychological vulnerability. Highly sensitive people who love deeply often describe feeling misunderstood in relationships. Partners may accuse them of overreacting, being too sensitive, or making mountains out of molehills. But from the HSP's perspective, they're simply responding authentically to what they're experiencing. Their nervous system isn't manufacturing intensity. It's genuinely processing emotional information at a different level than others. HSPs also tend to fall in love deeply and quickly. When they connect with someone who seems to understand their inner world, the experience can feel transcendent. They envision futures, imagine profound connection, and open their hearts completely, sometimes before the other person is ready or willing to reciprocate at the same intensity. This can lead to heartbreak, not because the HSP was foolish, but because their depth of processing creates emotional experiences that move faster and deeper than others might understand. The strength of highly sensitive people in relationships is their capacity for genuine intimacy. When they find partners who appreciate and reciprocate their depth, HSPs create relationships of extraordinary emotional richness. They're attentive lovers who remember small details, anticipate needs, and create emotional safety through their attunement. They're capable of profound loyalty and enduring commitment because their emotional investment isn't surface level. It goes to the core of who they are. The challenge for HSPs is learning to protect their sensitivity without shutting down. They need partners who respect their need for processing time, who don't mock or minimize their emotional responses, and who can match at least some of their depth. They also need to develop strong self-care practices, recognizing that their nervous systems require more downtime and emotional space than others might need. One of the most painful aspects of loving too deeply is the tendency to repeat self-defeating patterns across multiple relationships. People with anxious attachment, abandonment wounds, or codependent tendencies often find themselves drawn to the same type of partner again and again. Typically someone emotionally unavailable, avoidant, or incapable of providing the consistent love they desperately need. This isn't masochism or poor judgment. It's the unconscious mind attempting to resolve old wounds by recreating them. Sigmund Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the tendency to reenact unresolved trauma in an unconscious attempt to master it. If your father was emotionally distant, you might find yourself drawn to partners who withhold affection. If your mother was unpredictable, you might choose partners whose love feels conditional. The unconscious reasoning seems to be, if I can get this person to love me consistently, I'll finally prove I'm worthy. I'll heal the original wound. But this strategy almost never works. Instead, it reinforces the original wound. The emotionally unavailable partner confirms your fear that you're not enough. The avoidant partner triggers your abandonment wound by pulling away whenever you get close. And because your attachment system is activated by this familiar pattern of longing and deprivation, it actually feels like love. Intense, desperate, consuming love. Meanwhile, people who might offer stable, secure love often feel boring or friendship-like because they're not triggering your familiar patterns. This is why people who love too deeply often describe dramatic, tumultuous relationships full of passion, conflict, breakups, and reunions. The emotional intensity isn't evidence of depth or destiny. This could imply that it's actually evidence of activated attachment wounds, with both partners unconsciously playing out unresolved childhood dynamics. The anxiously attached person pursues. The avoidant partner withdraws. The pursuer intensifies. The withdrawer distances further. It's a dance both painful and familiar, and without conscious intervention, it can continue indefinitely. Trauma bonding adds another layer to why people stay in relationships that clearly aren't meeting their needs. Trauma bonding occurs when intermittent reinforcement, periods of affection followed by rejection, Warmth followed by coldness creates a powerful psychological attachment. This pattern is particularly common in relationships with narcissistic or emotionally abusive partners. The unpredictability keeps the anxiously attached person in a constant state of activation, flooding their system with stress hormones and bonding neurochemicals. The brief moments of connection and approval become intensely rewarding, precisely because they're contrasted with periods of withdrawal or cruelty. From a neurobiological perspective, this pattern hijacks the brain's reward system. The intermittent nature of the reinforcement makes the occasional moments of connection more powerful than consistent, stable love would be. It's the same principle that makes gambling addictive. The unpredictability of reward creates a stronger compulsion than predictable reward. People caught in trauma bonds often recognize intellectually that the relationship is harmful, yet they feel unable to leave because the emotional attachment has become confused with their survival instincts. Another pattern that keeps people who love deeply trapped in unfulfilling relationships is the savior complex. This is particularly common in codependent individuals and those with anxious attachment who've learned that love means rescuing or fixing others. They're drawn to partners with obvious problems: addiction, emotional instability, unhealed trauma, because unconsciously they believe that being needed is the same as being loved. If they can heal this person, save them, be the one who finally breaks through their walls, then they'll prove their worth and earn permanent devotion. But people can't be fixed by romantic love, no matter how intense or devoted. Each person must do their own healing work. The would-be savior ends up exhausted, resentful, and often blamed for the very problems they tried to solve. And the person being saved may feel more like a project than a partner, reinforcing their own shame and making genuine intimacy impossible. Self-sabotage is another common pattern. When relationships are going well, people who love too deeply may unconsciously create problems. They might pick fights, become suspicious without cause, or pull away emotionally. This happens because intimacy and security feel unfamiliar and therefore unsafe. Their nervous systems are wired for chaos and uncertainty. When things are calm and stable, anxiety paradoxically increases because the calm doesn't match their internal expectations. By creating drama or distance, they return to a familiar emotional state, even though it's painful. These patterns are maintained by confirmation bias, the tendency to notice evidence that confirms our beliefs while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. If you believe you're unworthy of consistent love, you'll focus on any small sign of your partner's distance or disinterest, while dismissing or minimizing their expressions of affection and commitment. Your brain is essentially searching for evidence that your worst fears are true, and unsurprisingly, it finds what it's looking for. Breaking these patterns requires not just awareness, but consistent, conscious effort to choose differently, even when every instinct is screaming to repeat the familiar dance. It means dating people who feel wrong because they're stable and available. It means sitting with the discomfort of intimacy without sabotaging it. It means recognizing when you're being drawn to someone because they trigger your wounds, rather than because they're genuinely compatible. The good news is that patterns, while deeply ingrained, aren't destiny. Neural plasticity means our brains can form new pathways and unlearn old ones. Relationships themselves can be healing when we choose partners who provide consistent security and remain steady through our moments of activation. But this requires vulnerability, the willingness to risk being wrong about our unworthiness, to allow someone to love us in ways we didn't experience as children. Breaking free from patterns of loving too deeply requires more than understanding. It requires rewiring deeply ingrained neural and emotional patterns. The first and perhaps most crucial step is developing awareness of your attachment style and the specific triggers that activate your insecure patterns. This isn't about self-blame or pathologizing your capacity for deep feeling. It's about recognizing that your intense reactions to certain relationship situations aren't character flaws, but adaptive strategies formed in childhood that are no longer serving you. Awareness begins with noticing your patterns. Do you become anxious when your partner doesn't text back immediately? Do you catastrophize minor conflicts, assuming they signal the end? Do you feel desperate for reassurance, even when your partner has done nothing to suggest they're leaving? These reactions are your attachment system activating, and based on therapeutic approaches to attachment healing, we can assume that learning to observe these activations without immediately acting on them is crucial. Nervous system regulation is fundamental to healing anxious attachment patterns. When your attachment system activates, your body goes into a stress response, heart racing, cortisol spiking, thoughts spiraling. In this state, you can't think clearly or respond skillfully. Learning to regulate your nervous system before responding to perceived threats in relationships changes everything. This might involve deep breathing, placing your hand on your belly to ground yourself, going for a walk, or engaging in other somatic practices that signal safety to your brain. The goal isn't to suppress your feelings, but to create enough space between stimulus and response that you can choose your actions rather than being driven by panic. Over time, as you repeatedly practice regulation during moments of activation, you begin to build new neural pathways, ones that don't automatically interpret distance as abandonment or conflict as catastrophe. Building self-worth independent of relationships is perhaps the most challenging but essential aspect of healing. People who love too deeply often outsource their sense of value to their partners, needing constant external validation to feel okay about themselves. This makes relationships feel like life or death stakes, because without the relationship, they lose not just a partner, but their very sense of worthiness. This could explain why breakups feel so devastating. It's not just grief over loss, but an identity crisis. Healing requires gradually learning to validate yourself, to recognize your inherent worth regardless of whether anyone is reflecting it back to you. This might involve keeping a list of your strengths and reviewing it when you feel inadequate. It might mean noticing when you're seeking reassurance from your partner and instead offering reassurance to yourself. It's about expanding your tolerance for uncertainty, learning that you can survive not knowing exactly how your partner feels at every moment. That ambiguity doesn't equal danger. Reparenting your inner child sounds like therapy jargon, but it's a powerful practice for healing attachment wounds. The anxiously attached part of you isn't your adult self. It's a young, frightened part still carrying childhood fears of abandonment. This part needs what it didn't get then. Consistent reassurance, unconditional acceptance, the message that you're lovable exactly as you are. You can offer this to yourself. When you notice that panicked voice saying they're going to leave, you can respond not with more panic, but with compassion. I know you're scared, but we're safe. We're adults now. We can handle this. Over time, as you repeatedly meet your inner child's fears with adult wisdom and reassurance, that young part begins to trust that you, your adult self, won't abandon it the way others did. This internal security gradually reduces your desperate need for external validation. You become your own secure base, which paradoxically makes you more capable of healthy intimacy because you're no longer clinging from a place of terror. Establishing boundaries is often difficult for people who love deeply, particularly those with codependent tendencies. Boundaries can feel like rejection or selfishness when you've learned that love means complete self-sacrifice. But healthy boundaries aren't walls. They're guidelines that protect your well-being while still allowing connection. They're how you honor both yourself and your partner as separate individuals with different needs. Learning to set boundaries might start small. Saying no to a request when you're depleted, carving out time for your own interests, not immediately dropping everything when your partner wants attention. Based on what we know about boundary development, we can infer that each time you maintain a boundary despite feeling guilty or anxious, you're building evidence that you can preserve yourself while still being loved. You're proving to your nervous system that connection doesn't require self-annihilation. Choosing different partners is crucial, but often overlooked. If you're repeatedly drawn to emotionally unavailable, avoidant, or narcissistic partners, healing requires consciously choosing differently, even when stable, secure people feel boring at first. Your nervous system is accustomed to drama and intensity as markers of real love. Someone who's consistent, available, and responsive might not trigger that addictive rush of longing and relief. But this is what secure attachment feels like: calm, steady, safe. It takes time to rewire your attraction patterns. You might need to consciously override your initial instincts, dating people who seem too nice or too stable, and giving those relationships time to develop before judging whether there's real connection. As you experience what consistent, secure love actually feels like, your nervous system gradually recalibrates. The calm begins to feel like peace rather than boredom. The stability becomes attractive rather than bland. Therapy can accelerate this healing process significantly. Working with a therapist trained in attachment theory, trauma, or relational patterns provides a safe relationship in which to examine your patterns without judgment. The therapeutic relationship itself becomes a corrective experience, a place where you can be fully seen, where your needs matter, where you're not too much. Over time, this internalized experience of secure relationship begins to reshape your expectations about all relationships. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help challenge the automatic negative thoughts that fuel anxious attachment. Interpersonal therapy can improve how you relate to others, and psychodynamic therapy can uncover the deeper, often unconscious patterns driving your relationship choices. The specific modality matters less than finding a therapist you trust and committing to the process of examining patterns you've carried your whole life. Healing also requires grieving what you didn't receive as a child. Many people who love too deeply carry unacknowledged grief about their early experiences. They minimize what happened, telling themselves it wasn't that bad, or that others had it worse. But comparison doesn't diminish your pain. If you needed consistent emotional presence and didn't get it, that loss deserves to be mourned. If you needed to feel unconditionally loved and instead felt you had to earn affection, that's a genuine wound. Allowing yourself to grieve, to feel anger at what was missing, sadness about what you missed, even rage at caregivers who failed you, creates space for healing. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. Many people skip this step, wanting to jump straight to forgiveness or moving on. But grief is necessary. It's how we metabolize old pain so it stops driving our present behavior. Building a life outside of relationships is another crucial element. When romantic relationship is your primary source of meaning, identity, and emotional regulation, the stakes become impossibly high. Developing friendships, pursuing interests, creating accomplishments, and finding purpose beyond partnership gives you stability that doesn't depend on any one person. It means a breakup, while painful, isn't existential. You still have yourself, your communities, your passions. This doesn't mean relationships become less important. It means they become more balanced. You bring yourself to partnership rather than looking for someone to complete you. You share life with someone rather than making them your entire life. This shift paradoxically makes you more attractive and allows for healthier relationships because you're not suffocating your partner with the weight of being your everything. Perhaps most importantly, healing requires self-compassion rather than self-judgment. Your capacity to love deeply isn't a flaw. It's often a profound strength born from early pain. People who love deeply tend to be highly empathic, attuned to others' needs, capable of profound intimacy, and willing to show up fully in relationships. These are beautiful qualities. The goal isn't to love less, but to love more wisely, from a place of security rather than fear. Your attachment style developed as an adaptation to your early environment. That anxious vigilance, that desperate clinging, that willingness to sacrifice yourself, these were survival strategies formed by a child trying to ensure they wouldn't be abandoned. They made sense then. They kept you connected to caregivers you depended on. The fact that these strategies no longer serve you as an adult doesn't mean you were wrong or weak to develop them. It means you're ready to update your strategies based on your current reality and capacities. Healing isn't linear, and you won't achieve perfect security. Even securely attached people have moments of doubt, fear, or neediness in relationships. The goal is to expand your window of tolerance for relationship uncertainty, to build enough internal security that you're not constantly on the edge of panic, and to develop the skills to self-regulate when your attachment system does activate. Over time, loving deeply can become a gift you offer freely, rather than a desperate need you must have met to survive. The journey from anxious, desperate love to secure, grounded love is neither quick nor easy. It requires facing painful truths about your past, sitting with uncomfortable emotions in the present, and consistently choosing new behaviors, even when old patterns feel safer. But on the other side of this work is a kind of love you may not have known was possible. Love that feels peaceful instead of panicked. chosen instead of compulsive, abundant instead of scarce. You learn that you can survive uncertainty, that you have worth independent of anyone's validation, that intimacy doesn't require losing yourself, that you can feel deeply without drowning in those feelings, that the right partners will appreciate your capacity for depth rather than running from it. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that you can be your own secure base, carrying that sense of being loved and worthy wherever you go. This doesn't mean you stop feeling intensely or caring deeply. Those capacities remain part of who you are, but they become sources of strength rather than sources of suffering. Your depth becomes wisdom. Your sensitivity becomes attunement. Your capacity for profound connection becomes the foundation for relationships that nourish rather than deplete you. You learn to love deeply without losing yourself in the process, and that changes everything.